wasn't much to. Rebecca, really happy to have you here. Thanks so much for being willing to come and talking with us about your research using the GES. I'll throw it to you.
Great. Thank you, Mike. You are very kind. Thanks everyone for being here. I really look forward to and invite feedback as this is a work in progress. Uh, so where this paper grows out of is our attempt to assess a brand new core program here at Baylor University. And I just wanted to give a hat tip to Mike, who was able to give me data, cleaned data early, so I couldn't have presented this paper last summer without your help. So thank you so much. And everyone can see my slides. So I'm a political scientist by training, and what I was trying to do, and this was for a political science conference, and I presented as part of a civic education track. So that's the lens and the disciplinary lens and context. Um, I was approaching this from, but just as a brief background, because I'm not sure if there are any other political scientists in the room, but sort of the theoretical lens that I used to frame the paper was this literature on the priority of civic engagement in political science education, noting the overall decline in civic engagement and civic efficacy among U.S. citizens. And so this is a literature growing out of uh, data on US civic engagement, just to take a step back. But also this moment that political scientists had as a discipline starting in the early 2000s, recognizing that we were essentially failing at our jobs. And a twin theme in the literature was also recognizing that it's really challenging to assess these particular concepts, starting with how we define civic engagement, and that in some places in the literature there's a conflation with political engagement. So we're conflating our independent and dependent variables, as a discipline. Also, framing you framing this in a manageable way, and then third, and here's where the GES comes in, finding quality data. And so we have nationwide data about the impact, for example, that participation in co-curricular or extracurricular activities has on students' sense of civic efficacy, but we just don't have great data on what we're doing in the classroom. You know, for the reason that each institution is a bit different. So here's where my work in my other hat in Baylor's Office of Engaged Learning, where we're a member of the community-based global learning collaborative, came in, and I thought there's so much, I think so many opportunities for the GES to speak to these broader concerns that I have as a political scientist about civic efficacy. And so for those who are new and maybe joining this conversation for the first time, let me ever so ineptly describe the GES and defer to Mike and his team for specific questions. But the three themes, the three components that the GES helps us to measure: global citizenship, cultural humility, and critical reflection. And so I'm focusing on the first. So as Mike noted, thinking about your particular program and where the GES might be most effective in measuring it. I'll say other programs at Baylor are looking at all three. So for example, our partners and the Center for Global Engagement, which runs our study abroad programs, but also it runs the Baylor and Washington program, which I'm the faculty director of too, is looking at all three of these components. So within the global citizenship scales, we have civic efficacy, and I focus primarily on the closed-ended questions. Political voice, 8 closed-ended questions. Conscious consumption, 10 questions. Global civic responsibility and human rights belief. And then in my broader paper, just pointed to the wonderful work that's been done establishing the robust nature of the construction of the survey itself. So looking at Hartman's work and Matt Gendell's work too. So what is it that our core program does, and how does it tie to this broader discussion of civic engagement? So I'm sorry for a lot of the text. I've tried to highlight the pieces that are most relevant. So what we have in the College of Arts and Sciences at Baylor University and the College of Arts and Sciences is comprised of both our humanities, social sciences, and science disciplines. We're approximately 45% of the undergraduate student body at Baylor University, which is a mid-sized private institution that enrolls approximately 15,000 undergraduates situated in Central Texas in Waco. And I provided our land acknowledgement, the original home of the Wichita and affiliated tribes. So we're in year number 2 of a new core curriculum requirement that all students in the College of Arts and Sciences are now required to take a course in engaged learning, defined as community engaged learning, whether they're engaging with the local community here in Waco, the broader community in Texas, in the United States, or abroad through global learning opportunities. And so the first criteria for any course that's placed on this distribution list is that they need to get outside what we affectionately refer to as the Baylor bubble, right? They need to engage with communities beyond our university. And so each course that's part of this curriculum involves working with a community partner in some way, whether it's through service learning, through project-based or problem-based learning, where the course is partnered with a community partner, such as a local nonprofit, or a student is participating in an internship. So those are some of the sort of the primary course designs. The second piece is that this is part of a broader course structure that is trying to situate students and prepare them for citizenship. And so as we think about what it is that we're tasked to provide, we're looking at both civic skills and civic knowledge. So knowledge about how the systems work, but also the skills to be efficacious citizens. And then third and finally, tied to our university's religious mission, contributing to the public good, which is proposed not in a non-denominational ecumenical way. So again, tied to civic identity. So here's how I tried to map the 3 learning outcomes for this core curriculum onto the political science literature, looking at civic identity and civic knowledge, focusing particularly here on civic identity. So our sample population, I looked at the survey data from 3 of our courses. So this isn't the entire population at Baylor University that was given the GES. Instead, I was able to use the matching to see, okay, am I testing or looking at just the courses that are part of our core? And so I looked at 3 of our philanthropy and public service courses, which are the 1000 level, that is the entry level courses, to try to get students who were more alike in, say, comparing a 1000 level with a junior or senior level course. And so the 3 courses that I looked at also included very similar types of community engagement. And 2 of those 3 in particular included service work through local ESL courses, both local ESL tutoring, citizenship course tutoring, job tutoring. So the students work with a local congregation called La Puerta, and then also our local community college where these courses are offered. I looked at matched cases, the pre and post test that was administered, and I looked at the fall and spring semester for the previous academic year. And here's how I operationalized the terms. So I said for civic skills, the civic efficacy and political voice scales, I thought map onto the literature in political science for civic skills, where civic identity, how students perceive themselves in relation to their communities, the conscious consumption, global civic responsibility, and human rights beliefs, a battery of questions I thought could comprise a good measure of civic identity. And I'm interested to hear what you all think about that. I want to make sure that I'm not straying too far from the survey's intent. So I had three hypotheses. As we all do. And I was delighted that two of them were confirmed. That is the two substantive hypotheses, which is first, that students would show improvement in their civic skills from the pre and post test. Second, that the students would show improvement in their civic efficacy from the pre and to the post test. And then also looking at some of the other studies that folks using the GES survey have had to date, also had some hypotheses about special populations, in particular first generation students and underrepresented minority students, that they would have comparatively greater gains. That hypotheses didn't bear out. I only have partial confirmation for that. So here is our overview for the response rate. We had 510 students who were enrolled in those three courses. I had 158 students who responded to the pre-test. That dropped the post-test to 96 or 19% of the overall population. And within that, we had 76 matched cases. Only 68 of them completed the entire survey. So for the other 8 students, they skipped some pieces, and I indicate that in the fuller paper. So looking at roughly 13 to 15%. So more than a 10% response rate in the entire sample. So I think we say respectable representation there. I will admit to you fully that it had been 20 years since my graduate level statistics course, because I don't use empirical methods in my political science research. I am a political theorist, but I happen to be married to a political scientist who does behavioral work. So he helped me refresh my memory on regressions. So I'll move through these pretty quickly, but just to say that the difference of means test, I was just delighted that I had statistically significant results across all of the areas, and some of them at the 0.01 level. So for the civic engagement scale, that was significant. So positive change at the 0.01 level. For the political voice scale, significant. Almost, but I say at the 0.05 level, so not quite 0.01 level. Conscious consumption, also under civic identity, significant at the 0.01 level. The global civic responsibility, also significant at the 0.01 level. Human rights beliefs, this is the one that is only at the 0.1. So the lowest among the among all of the responses. So the key takeaways I have from this is that, and again, based on just 1 year of data, is that the students showed positive growth in both the civic skills and civic identity across those five areas at least the 0.1 level, and for 3 out of the 5 areas at the 0.01 level, and at the remaining at the 0.05. And so, what I try to communicate at the audience at the International Political Science Association conference that I attended, try to evangelize a little bit the GES and CBGL, and this amazing tool. Yeah, get the hearts. Thanks, Mike. Just this amazing tool, this amazing research tool that I think provides really rich data. That I haven't even fully explored yet, right? So I don't have the cross-institutional panel of data. I also don't have multiple years from our own institution. That was just the first year of the program. It was our second year overall participating in the community-based global learning collaborative. So it was just our second year participating. In the first year of this core program didn't exist yet. And then just not a limitation for our purposes, but just a limitation, recognizing within the literature that I wasn't looking at civic knowledge. In other words, the students may be particularly efficacious in a very wrong understanding of how things work, and that's a story for another day. So I really welcome feedback. Like I said, it's a work in progress. I want to sit down this summer and look at this year's data and see where we're at with that. And start to sharpen my, refresh my empirical skills a bit, and look at the full survey as well. So I'm just so delighted that you all came today, and really look forward to talking with you more about this. At this point, I'm going to stop sharing my screen so that it's not filling this space, and toss it back to Mike.
Thanks, Rebecca. Yes, thanks, Francine.
Thank you.
Um, uh, it's wonderful. I just love hearing people talk about the survey and how it can be useful for folks who, whether you're a regular attendee, there is a worksheet that we have that kind of gets people started on thinking about how they want to analyze their data. I have some questions for you, Rebecca, but I'm going to open the floor
Yeah.
to folks and just do folks have questions, thoughts, responses to what Rebecca has offered us today? Yeah, Francine, thanks.
Um, I know we're not supposed to require the survey.
Hmm.
We can incentivize and
Yeah.
chivvy and encourage and all those things. So, what did you do to get? Because that's a pretty good response, right? That's a number of marks.
Yeah. So I'll say, part of it is that the students, some of them were first year students, and so they still think these things are required. And so I think that you see that reflected in the drop off between the pre and post test. I think also our instructors were just really diligent about giving reminders, and also saying, this is just really helpful for us for research. And so I think there was, the students were doing it out of a sense of duty or community responsibility to make sure that they were, participating in this communal thing. I think for our study abroad is
Oh,
Raphael here,
Rebecca
my
froze here
colleague.
for a moment. I'll jump in.
Oh dear.
Oh, he's back. You're back.
Okay, great. I was trying to see if my colleague Raphael was here. He's in our
Yes, I'm here.
study abroad. Oh, you are. So I think that you guys have an additional study abroad survey too, right? That the students give, that they take about
Yes.
experience.
Yes, that
And
is more
so,
programmatic. So
yeah,
that's the
programmatic. And so I think students in that program, they fill them both out together, and they just sort of see them. So it's this idea of they're participating in both ways. So I think it's a cultural thing too, that um that the way it's pitched, and then the instructors will put it as a to-do list item, but a not graded to-do list item. And so students check it off as a box, but they make it clear that it's not required in that way. Yeah.
And thanks for that question, Francine. And to provide that context, because we have IRB approval for the survey through Worcester Polytech Institute, that's one reason why we cannot require
Mhm.
students to take the survey. But Rebecca, you just named a lot of good strategies for getting students to take the survey. And having 65, 70 students, I mean, when it comes to then the statistical power, right, to then be able to look for significance, I would say even with 20 to 25 students, there's some possibilities there. So you
Yeah.
far exceeded that. Um, so yeah, great question, Francine. Other questions right now that folks have? Well, I will ask a question then, and I'm partly curious because Ruhi and I, as I mentioned, we're just looking at our data set from the 24-25 year. We have 815 cases we're working with.
Oh,
And
great.
we've started to run some statistical analysis. And so folks on the call, you might or might not be familiar with like that p-value 0.01, 0.05, right? Trying to disprove that null hypothesis of is there something significant, is there statistical significance in these data? We're seeing things though with 800 students, we're like, oh, a zero point 0.1 change from pre to post is giving us statistical significance. However, is
Mm-hmm.
that practical significance, right? So, what do you, I mean, do you have any thoughts on that, Rebecca? And don't want to test your memory of like what the increases
Yeah.
were from pre to post, but did that strike you at all in looking at the data of like, oh, it's significant, but what does that really mean?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. And so, this was something that I thought about. I thought about too, and you think, well, some of the students may select particular sections of the course because they're already inclined toward, and have a disposition toward um cultural humility, or thinking about you know global human rights. And so, to that point, and that this is not answering your question, and maybe I think I'm even sidestepping it, having having any movement, I think, in a population that may have already self-selected to have
Mm,
this experience or this particular course, I think is noteworthy. And I think every program is going to be a little bit different with respect to where the experience that they're offering, that where the students are responding to the survey, sits in their own curriculum or their own co-curricular activities. Um, I think this one's unique because it's a requirement. It's a university requirement. But to be fair, we aren't giving this to every single course, because there are some that I think just aren't um they're not yet at the level of like where they're part of the fair trade learning commitments. I wanted to try to exclude, or try to give the survey to the courses that are part of what it is that we're trying to test. Looking here at the values, just for example, under conscious consumption, um it's a point, like a 0.35 change.
mm,
So,
yeah,
marginal, but a little bit. And then for global civic responsibility, it's like a 0.175 change. So same, the same.
yeah,
Um,
yeah.
but I think, to be fair, like, when we're looking at literature and statistical analyses, it's the statistical significance that matters, right? Not the it's the direction of the, and not and the statistical significance,
Yes,
not necessarily the margin. So
yes,
that's the justification I would give and say
yeah.
even a little bit means that there's an impact. We also didn't have differences. I didn't officially put these in, but this was my sort of personal my gut feeling, not like this, scholarly hypotheses. I wondered if there would be differences between um, our students based on either gender or on political partisanship too, and that didn't bear out in the data either. So that wasn't one of my official hypotheses, because it was more just a curiosity rather than something rooted in the data. But I'll add that as a note too, that that wasn't statistically significant.
Yeah, yeah. Francine has a question, and maybe I sparked it, so maybe I should take it on. But Rebecca, I'll
Sure,
give
yeah,
you a
please
chance
do.
first. What the statistical versus practical significance?
Yes,
Yeah,
you said you use those two terms
yeah,
and
yeah. And I guess that gets to, so as Rebecca said, there was and taking all this, the numbers with how the numbers get translated, right? So the 0.35, right? We could look at that and say, well, there's some movement, some practical movement from a student before their experience to after the experience. Um, in the cases that Ruhi and I are looking at, where we're seeing like a zero point 0.1 or 0.06, is like, does that practically mean anything? Even though from a statistical significance standpoint, the p-values we're running, the t-tests we're running. So Francine, this all comes back to comparing means using statistical analysis. We use SPSS to run means testing or t-tests against not only the pre and post, but also some demographic or program factors.
Mm-hmm.
So that statistical significance means that we can cautiously generalize, right? That there's something happening here that we can say, well, if it's happening for these 65 students at Baylor, the numbers are strong enough to say we can confidently say that it's happening to students throughout all the students at Baylor who are taking these courses. That's what the statistical significance offers us.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas the practical significance is more of a maybe it's that gut feeling of what do these numbers and scales really mean? And what does a 0.35 increase even mean for a student from pre to post, practically speaking? If there's anyone else on this call who is a data guru and would like to correct what I said or add to it, please do. So one thing I'll mention that came up, and I didn't mention in talking about the three outcomes and the eight scales, and as Rebecca named, there are also a host of program factors and demographic factors, right? So what Ruhi and I are now doing is looking at pre and post averages, and let's look at that by gender. Right? Are there
Yeah.
differences between men and women when it comes to openness to diversity or cultural adaptability? Already, we can tentatively say for this year, there's a difference we found between students from the US and international students
Yeah.
when it comes to cultural adaptability and openness to diversity. So that's something that, like, oh, for the folks working in global offices, study abroad offices, or international student offices, that could be important information to think about. Why are students from the US potentially seeming on average, to gain more in those two outcomes than international students who are studying here?
Yeah, and Francie just asked a question about that, and the formatting is wonky. I apologize. But yeah, so that's part of the GES, and we looked at, as I said, my dear kind husband who wouldn't let me add him. He's like, no, don't put my name. This is your work, your theoretical framework. He just like plugged it into. He uses Stata, but we controlled for all of the demographic factors, and none of them were significant. So looked at, I here is what I asked him to look at. So looked at that gender described, looking at women versus other groups. That way, I don't think we had any non-binary students or students who identified as transgender in the survey this year. Non-white, first-gen conservative, and then I also controlled for religion since we are a religious institution, and none of those were significant. So I will say that it wasn't statistically significant, but students who identified as politically liberal did show um, more movement than students who were conservative. So yeah, so I have that data looked at, but it didn't have any effect on any statistically measurable effect on the responses. Which was interesting because, and I have a question I want to ask you all, but I want to address Patrick's question first. No, Patrick, I haven't looked at the qualitative responses, I'll say, in any systematic way. I looked at them broadly, and I'll say that students just didn't write a whole lot. And the survey, to be fair, the survey is quite long. We're asking them to complete it. Well, one at the beginning, they haven't had the experience yet, but at the end, it's coming at the end of the semester when they're dealing with finals. We usually ask them to complete it within a week after the end of the semester, because after that they're off and doing other things and they're going to forget anyway. So when I looked, I'll say just tentatively, there wasn't much there that they wrote. And I'll say some of the things that they wrote tended to be, they took it as sort of a comment or critique about the activity that they were doing as opposed to the thing that they were learning. So, for those who teach courses, some of the kind of random comments that you get on a semester evaluation, we saw there too. So a little bit noisy and maybe not necessarily tied to the to that. But yeah, that's something that I need to do.
Rebecca, if I could just add before you pose your
Sure.
question, that the April presentation with Annika and Caitlin, my predecessor, worked with the qualitative data using Deduce as a software program to do coding. And so if you're looking at examining the qualitative data in the GES, come back in April, listen to Annika and how she and Caitlin systematically looked at that qualitative data. Sorry, Rebecca, go ahead.
No, and I'm glad to know that, because that is not my training at all, and so that is something that I need to do. So the question I want to ask folks, but again, don't feel free, like you have to answer it if you have other questions. Is the feedback that I got at the conference where I presented this was kind of disappointing in that, well, it was a big panel. There were lots of us, as we are wont to do as academics. People talked more than their time, and that didn't leave a whole lot of time for the discussant. But the discussant, I think, got hung up on like the first paragraph of my description of our university. So Baylor is a Christian university, and the discussant said, "Well, did you think about or address that maybe you only had this because the students are Christian, and um so they felt civically efficacious because of their religious identity." And so I didn't have a chance to respond, but my answer was, well, one, we controlled for that, and that wasn't, in the statistical model, there's no reflection of that either. But also, our students are relatively diverse. It's a religious institution, but not all the students are religious. And even if they are religious, it's not a monolith, right? Even among Christian denominations, there are very different, very different Christian denominations represented, and we have a critical mass of students who are from other faith traditions as well. So we have a number of Islamic students, for example. So my question to this community who works in this data, or anyone, it doesn't have to be people who are working in the GES, is I really want your advice for how I can sort of frame the research in a way that it isn't, I mean, just kind of dismissed by the broader community, to say, well, this is something that's that's unique to your institution. And I know when I look at the broader survey, I'll have that too, but just really wanted to talk to those who are from a diversity of institutions who are also doing this work. Yeah.
Thoughts on that? I'm reserving my own thoughts because I have one, but
Yeah. Thank you.
I thought your original instinct to collect several years of data,
Mm-hmm.
because unfortunately, I think the sample size is a challenge if you're trying to represent sort of institutional narrative or outcomes. And that's a challenge I think we all face using this
Sure.
tool. It's something where, as Mike pointed out, is kind of a perennial point of discussion. But then there's opportunities to potentially connect with others in this community of practice, to compare and contrast and, see where there are through lines, and analyzing different program types, different interventions
Mm-hmm.
that have been utilized in response to using the survey over time. Um, those are just some thoughts.
Thank you. That's helpful.
Rebecca, I just want to say that I've been working with the GES for a couple of years, using it in one class, haven't analyzed any of my data. It's kind of been intimidating. I look at the statistics, and it's a foreign language to me. But it was really helpful to hear how you did this, right? And what you did, how you gathered, like your hypotheses, and the literature you were connecting it to. You really have given me direction and insight in how to work with the GES, and I'm really appreciative of that.
Well, that's very kind, and I'm happy to share the paper with anyone who wants to look at with a with the recognition. It's 1 year. It's and um, still a work in progress. I'm happy to share and welcome feedback. Thanks, Francine.
Please do share that, Rebecca. I mean, and if
I'll
I would
email
love
it
to
to you.
share it
Yeah,
with this group,
Mhm.
and if you're okay with it,
I'd be.
putting it on our website, adding it to our
Yeah,
publications.
that'd be
Um,
wonderful.
and yeah, happy to do that. And I was also struck, Francine, as you said about Rebecca, how you talked about mapping onto the literature, right, in a way that aligns with your discipline, and like what a skill that is, right? And so there's a step there that there's some learning learning from you about how you did that. And then also at the end you talked about how you're iterating on the analysis, which I think is also really interesting, that
Mhm.
starting with these two or three scales, right, and then thinking about, now let's look at the qualitative perhaps, or look at the
Mhm.
entire survey. So not trying to uh, consume it all at once, right, because there is a lot of information there.
Yeah. Well, and I mean, I think, and it could be that I could send this out to a political science teaching journal and they're like, what are you doing? Like, this doesn't match that. So, I think these things happen when you're trying to operationalize, your terms and look there, but it seemed, to me, I see so many connections between the literature. So I think that was what I was most looking for from that conference was, does this make sense, right? Um, does this survey seem to measure what is really at, and no one gave me any pushback on that. And then from you all, have I gone too far the other way? In other words, is this what the survey is measuring? Am I portraying it accurately too? So
Yeah, it feels that way. And I think I want to thank you again. I'm going to stop the recording here, but as we
sure.
continue the conversation,